Namaste everyone. Welcome to today's guest talk. The title today is Happiness and Wellbeing, and the speaker is Dr. Srividya. She is a career and life coach who works with teens, adults, and returning professionals to help them find joy and alignment in their careers and life. After working for over 20 years in the consulting, education, and corporate sector, she founded lifevidya in 2019. Her work in lifevidya is focused on helping students, professionals, and women at different stages of career and life transitions. Welcome, Vidya ma'am. We are delighted to have you today. Look forward to your session. Over to you.
Thank you, Arunima. It's really nice to be here today. I always feel so much at home with all of you and with the Yes team, especially. Good evening to everybody who's been able to take out time to join. And the topic for today is something that is so vast that we can spend hundreds of hours, or when we smile at each other, we can sense that, yes, there's happiness out there. So it's something which is so subtle, so significant, and so obvious. And yet, if we decide to sit down and define what is happiness, oh my God, that becomes like an intellectually and emotionally challenging task. So I'm just going to share a little bit about what I've read and experienced in today's session. And the truth is, happiness it's amazing, and you can see it when it's there, and you know it when it's not there. And if you decide to put variables to it and define it, you don't do justice, because it is something so nuanced, so subjective, and so different for each one of us in our individual settings. So with your permission, I'll just start sharing the screen while I do make a few points, and I will speak for a bit, and maybe after that we can open for any discussions or any things that anybody here would like to share, because there is so much here that we all know about. But before I talk about that, let me tell you, there are some books, okay? So you can see there's something called Happiness Unlimited, the Brahma Kumaris. So there is unlimited wisdom on happiness. Everybody's researched happiness. There's something called the Happiness Project by Gretchen Rubin. She's a journalist who turned around to decide that I want to figure out what happiness is. And she says, or why I spent a year trying to sing in the morning, clean my closets, fight right, read Aristotle, and generally have more fun. So we have everybody trying to figure out what is happiness and what is this thing that we are all trying to pursue. And guided by the mother, and I'm so fortunate, today's calendar reads, try to be happy. Immediately you'll be closer to the light. I think there is something which helps us tell us that, okay, maybe we picked the right topic for today. And with just that introduction of how vast a topic it is and how many people are grappling with it, I'm just going to jump in and share a little bit, and then we will talk about it as it proceeds. Yeah. So just sharing my screen, and can you see? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So if somebody asks me what makes you happy, I'll say sunflowers make me happy. And there's so many sunflowers in the ashram. They all gaze at each other, they swing towards the sun, or they smile at each other. Spending time with kids playing makes me happy. An amazing cup of coffee, which I can fix only for myself, I've learned to realize over the years, that makes me happy. And if I get all of these at the beginning of the day, wow, that's a good start to the day. And for me, it's these little things that make me happy. And I realize that the little things matter for many of us, not the bigger things, not the ones that we spend a lot of time chasing, but more about that later. And I'd love, for those of you who have something, maybe you can write it down and we can talk about it later. So today, because we're talking of a topic which is so vast, I just decided to anchor it with a theory which has been propounded by Dr. Tal Ben-Shahar. He is a Harvard psychologist, teaches there, and he actually calls it the hamburger model, but I have suitably modified it to the burger model. Basically, he's an athlete. He's also a psychologist, and he also teaches there. And he's a squash enthusiast. And he talks about his theory of how he found happiness, or how he found happiness being elusive and very different. So just jumping into the model, and I will share my twist on this a little bit more than his theory. And his theory is, of course, there on the YouTube channel, and I can share the link to that later. So, what he basically says is that being a squash player, he would practice very intensively, and he would kind of detox himself and take himself all very, very, juicy diets, junk food, everything for about a few months or maybe a few weeks. And then when he's finished with his squash tournament, he would come back and he would reward himself with juicy burgers to have at the end of the tournament. So this was his happiness. And that was his happiness moment, that, okay, I have worked hard. Now I deserve these burgers and I'm going to have them. And he would do this repeatedly, season over season. And he was just about 18 or 19 when he did this once, and the season was over, the tournament was over, and he came back and he rewarded himself to 4 burgers because he was really tired, voracious appetite, young lad. And he sat down to eat it, and it didn't feel that good. He was like, oh, what am I eating? I'm eating this. This is not good for me. It doesn't taste good. It doesn't feel good. What happened to me? So this is how, sitting there in that fast food joint, he came up with his model. So I'm going to quickly run you through this. And he says that a lot of us in life, we chase what feels good in the moment. I mean, what is called hedonism. And a lot of happiness, at least in the mainstream, is anchored around these hedonistic templates of, I do this because it feels good to me. I do this because it gives me momentary pleasure, or I do this because it feels right now. So eating a burger, eating an ice cream, and I'm not against junk food at all, but these are the things, things like going to a pub, party hard. Come on, let's party hard. It's Friday night. All of these things we do. And we say, okay, this is what gives us happiness. And we're all conditioned to feeling that this gives us joy. This gives us happiness. And he thought so too. And he said, okay, I've worked really hard. Now I deserve this happiness of my burger. And when he sat down to eat it, he said, oh no, I don't feel good about this anymore. And then he realized that in the few months or the few weeks that he hadn't had that kind of junk food, his body had detoxed in a certain way. And when he came back to eat that, it didn't feel good because he realized that that burger was not good for him in the long run to consume. And even in the short run, it didn't taste so right. And then he realized, really, this is what made me happy earlier, but it's not making me happy now. And he said that, all our life, we probably try to spend in trying to buy or get happiness in these things. And that's probably the reason why it's elusive. And then he went on in this theory. He talked about the rat racers, people who do not try to do things which feel good in the short run, but who always defer happiness. I'm going to work really hard today and build up my bank balance so that I can party tomorrow, so that I can have my annual vacation. And the truth is, all of us are conditioned to think like this. We spend Monday to Friday becoming rat racers, and Friday evening to Sunday afternoon, we are partying, and we consider this the template of a good, successful life. So rat racer, hedonist, rat racer, hedonist, rat racer, hedonist. And when we do this, when we are rat racers, we're not enjoying what we are doing then and there. We are deferring our happiness very often. And we're doing this because it's good for us in the future. And that's why it's called a rat race. And when we are hedonists, we're really enjoying the moment. But sometimes what we're doing is not good for us in the long run. Rewind, repeat this very often, then what we have is this feeling of, there's nothing here. nihilism or nothing. What am I doing? This burger doesn't taste good. It doesn't taste good right now. It's not going to do good for me in the long run. And the same thing I feel can be applied to what people would feel like a midlife crisis or a sense of meaninglessness. So, what is it that I'm doing? I'm running around. I've got all of this. I've got my happiness through my success model, so to speak, but I don't feel good. And the truth is that this is all our conditioning. It's what we've been brought up to believe and brought up to feel. And I've been part of this rat race and hedonist, assuming that this is how it's going to be, and felt very burnt out so that I couldn't even be a hedonist over the weekend because there was no energy to be that. So what do we do? How do we make a burger or a recipe for happiness, which is truly ours, which feels good in the short run, and also does good to us in the long run? And that's what I feel is really the crux of finding happiness for yourself. And it's really an individual recipe that each of us have to figure out. So if we can just quickly think of what is it that we like to do, we truly enjoy doing today in the short run too. And we know that in the long run also, this is going to be beautiful. It's going to help us. And it's not just doing things for the sensory pleasure or the momentary pleasure. And there is nothing wrong with being a hedonist, by the way. It's nice, it's imagined. And I think it's good to have all of these in moderation, to be a rat racer in moderation when you have a deadline, to be a hedonist. And it doesn't matter how aware and conscious we are, all of us have slumps wherein we go into this nothingness mode. And that's human. And if you want to know what is happiness for you, you have to feel unhappy sometimes. And in that feeling of unhappiness, in that embracing of unhappiness, is when you can say, okay, now I have this drive to be happy. Pretty much like saying, if there is food, it's only when a person is hungry that the person is going to move towards it. So it's only when you have experienced unhappiness or something called nothingness that you will start gearing towards, okay, what is it that makes me happy if this model is not working? And that's what we need to try and do. How can we make our happiness quadrant something which is good for us in the short run, makes us feel very happy, makes us feel joyful, energizes us, makes us feel like, okay, this is something that's worth doing, and also is for the long-term benefit. And my recipe for this burger will be different from yours, and yours will be different from someone else's. And that's the important thing here. So just like spend 10 seconds and just think, what is it that charges you? What is it that makes you happy? What is it that you can do even momentarily, which is not dependent on 100 variables outside? And there are times when I would ask people this and they'll say, oh, if I can take this vacation every month internationally, I'm like, okay, that's not going to work out, right? So think small, think practical, think things that you can do on a regular basis. And when I was trying to work my own life differently and try to figure out, okay, what is it that I'm missing? And why is it that one feels unhappy on certain days? I came up with this list of items which I was not doing regularly, or probably I was missing it for many days. So a walk in the park, in nature, in the forest, if possible, with as many trees as possible, because nature has this effect of just healing, anchoring, helping you feel better. Writing, journaling your emotions, exercising, yoga. I mean, there are so many things, playing with family or pets, sketching, listening to music, reading a podcast. Just look at your life and see on an everyday basis, am I able to take out time for the small things that make me happy? And if you have one or two of these also on your list, and if you're able to apply it, and if possible, I just keep it at the top, somewhere very visible, that, okay, this particular day is not so going so well, can I anchor it in something? And some of these just become part of your life. So walks or exercise becomes part of your life. Learning, reading, you just make a playlist and you say, okay, this is what I want to listen for the next week or month. and the kind of content you consume just becomes a part of your life. And whether you chat with an old friend and how often you chat, sometimes when we are rat racers, we don't have the energy to chat. We don't have the time to chat. And it's not without reason that all these places or pubs have such loud music. The truth is, you can't even hear yourself think when you go to those places. Forget trying to chat with somebody or reconnect. Everybody is just sitting around, trying to become numb. I think that's how the experience really felt like for me. So think what works for you. And if you can find even one or two things that you can do easily on an ongoing basis, my feeling is that happiness quadrant of yours will pump up and become better, look healthier. Yeah. And just moving ahead. And the truth is, when I try to do this, okay, here's one more. If you're having a little bit of struggle with trying to figure out as to what is it that you would like to include, psychologists know that depression or any of mental disorders, there may be a neurotransmitter imbalance also. And that's why we tend to use medicines to fix it. The truth is that you can work on yourself. You don't need to always have artificial means of fixing it. And what we really have through research, we found out is a bunch of happiness chemicals. And it's very simple to hack them. You just need to be aware. The moment you've done a task, the joy of going and ticking it off on that to-do list, okay, I've done it. It enhances dopamine. And it doesn't matter whether it's a work task or a home task or anything. Please realize everything you achieve is a task. We also have this hierarchy, especially with women, I've noticed. They'll say, oh, we cooked, but that's not called worthy. It's a task. You did it with love. Give yourself credit. And this is also a part of our conditioning of what we think is a laudable task and what we think is not. So if we have all of these chemicals in front of us, so playing with your children, playing with a baby, holding hands, hugging, if you can give a person a hug and if that hug can last like 10, 12 seconds, they say it releases oxytocin. If we all sit and smile and laugh for some time and we just give each other loving smiles, it's enough to release oxytocin. And it's not without reason that people see romantic movies. It's releasing oxytocin. That's why you're going and seeing them. And for those of us, I have friends who will say, okay, I've had this really bad work call. I'm going off for a walk to cool off. What are they doing? They're stabilizing their mood. They're walking or they're running. And what does that do after they've had that 45-minute walk or run? It brings them to a certain ground zero or balance. This friend of mine, she was going through a very bad patch personally, going through a divorce. I was asking her, so what do you do? She says, anyway, my sleep is disturbed. So I just get up at 5 a.m. in the morning and I run. I just jog continuously for 45 minutes to an hour. It's an amazing workout and it just grounds me so heavily. She went on to, of course, do all the marathons and she's through with that pace of life. But what was she doing? She was stabilizing her mood. What was happening inside? Serotonin was getting released. And all of these, if we know, we become conscious of it and we realize that, okay, this is what I can do to hack this. What is missing in my day? And it's not without reason. At the end of the day, one sits back and watches a sitcom or watches a Didi's comedy show or a Mr. Bean or what is that? There are these laughter challenges and laughter shows. What are we doing? At the end of a hard day, wherein we've negotiated traffic, negotiated workplace, had these conflicts, we're trying to kind of bring ourselves, ease the pain. Watching a comedy eases the pain. Switching on a nice scented candle and keeping it on the side actually eases the pain. And what are these? These are our natural endorphins getting released. So just take a look at this and see, is there one thing out of each that you can pick on and make it a part of your life? Maybe one or two. And you know what is missing in your life. You know how to balance it. You know how to hack and bring those happiness chemicals in your life naturally. And this works wonders, by the way. I've tried it with a lot of people, and they just print this and they keep it on the side, and it just works wonders. Receiving compliments and giving compliments, they cost you nothing. But such warmth, such genuine warmth that comes through, and the oxytocin level gets released. And what happens when the oxytocin level gets released? Gradually, your brain also starts functioning because everything is integrated at the end of the day. So this is about the chemicals. And the truth is that when we start applying them, and this is what I've realized, we say, okay, from tomorrow I'll go for a walk, or I'll make sure I meditate, or I'll make sure I journal. And we're very good about it, huh? We do it for 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, and then something happens, gone. And then we feel bad about not doing it. And then we criticize ourselves for not doing it. It's our life. It's our happiness recipe. It's our day. Just pick yourself up and restart. If something is not working, just lower the bar. Instead of saying, I'm going to walk for 1 hour every day, make it 20 minutes. Whatever works for you. And this is not a place where we need to criticize ourselves. We just need to keep course correcting, keep seeing, okay, do we have a small reminder here, something which reminds us to do this? Maybe go for a walk, maybe go out and call a friend. Easy, very, very easy. So just happiness comes with small things. Happiness comes with self-awareness and prioritizing them. And just being kind to yourself, because if you are changing a habit, you're changing something you've done for many years. And that's not easy. So just be very, very calm and patient with yourself. And, for those of us who feel that, oh no, I'm from this family, which is from a bunch of warriors, by the way, and it's true. You'll come across people, they will be meeting the craziest of disasters and somehow they'll be smiling. And then there'll be those, the smallest of things, and they'll be worrying about everything. You can call it temperament, you can call it personality. There is research which says that, there is a genetic influence to happiness. So if you're from a family of warriors, family of people who generally complained or were not so happy, yes, 50% of the contribution has come from there. And 10% is difficult circumstances. And we all face difficult circumstances because it's life, It could be a traffic jam. It could be an illness. It could be a job change. It could be a personal disaster. It could be a professional disaster or a challenge. And the truth is we all go through financial challenges. We go through many challenges. So 10% is those circumstances. So if 50% is our genes and 10% is our circumstances, we have 60%, which is kind of seems out of our league. So are we doomed? Not really, because there is that 40% that you can work on. And these numbers are, of course, just research. The numbers may vary. It's just to give us an idea of why we are inherently the way we are and how we can make it better for ourselves and how we can cope better and become happier. And once happiness becomes a habit, oh, what a wonderful life we lead. So how to work on yourself? All of the points that I've mentioned earlier. Pick any 1, 2, or 3 and start working on them. Do it consistently, and you will see that the 40% becomes happier. The 40% becomes happier. You are able to influence your circumstances so that 10% also becomes happier. The 10% becomes happier, then you are in an environment wherein your energy is also radiating. So if not anything else, people around you are also absorbing your energy. So even if you've got challenging genes, your progeny or your family or your friends are seeing how you're coping and working on yourself. And that creates a positive change in them. And it's like a domino effect. And it's beautiful. But it starts with that awareness or that consciousness and that intention that I'm going to work on myself. And yeah, circumstances will come. And Obviously, sometimes we're all going to feel low. We are human. That's why, we are human. But if you can actually work on yourself, and this is my theory, genes do mutate. So maybe over a few generations, this 50% is actually not unhappiness. It's the happiness gene getting transmitted. Don't you have families wherein you say, okay, I'm from a family, my mother is diabetic, my father is diabetic, so I'm doomed, I'm also diabetic. But then you will have that one person who will get up and say, I'm not going to be diabetic, I'm going to work on my lifestyle, I'm going to change, or I'm going to reverse my diabetes. And you can. The circumstances can be very hard or trying, but it's your perspective and how much you choose to influence what you do with yourself, your life. And that can have a very profound effect. And in fact, this lady who's written the Happiness Project, which I talked about earlier, was basically working on herself. And a whole lot of people who are seeking happiness, including the psychologist I talked about earlier and his hamburger model, he says, you see, I started to understand happiness when I embraced my unhappiness and understood why I was unhappy. And didn't question it, didn't criticize it, but embraced it as the lever to figure out what makes me happy. And that's why I say that, what I feel that it's going to be very different from each one of us, but there are some general things that I feel would be helpful. So just review your life and see, where are you coming from? And that's fine. It's all within your own scope of influence to change the trajectory and move it in a direction which makes you happier. And that's from the psychologist, of course. And, we can go deeper and deeper. And if you start working on yourself, you exercise, you get enough sunlight, you eat healthy, then there is this general feeling of well-being. So even on a day, you might not be at the peak of your happiness if you decide to measure on a scale of 1 to 10 and you say, okay, I'm only 5 today. But am I overall well? Yeah, I'm physically well. Am I emotionally coping with everything? Yeah, I'm coping with everything. Today was a hard day. And the dimension with which you look at life totally changes. And for me, that's well-being, an overall sense of well-being. And there will be ups and downs, but you know how to do what you need to do. And you allow yourself to feel your emotions rather than run away from them. I think that's a big one. A lot of us just run. To allow yourself to feel is also a pattern of conditioning that we need to inculcate. All said so far. So everything, and we are with the Yes platform, and my journey with the Aurobindo Ashram in terms of coming regularly and learning started sometime last April, and very erratically many decades back. So that's how it was. So what we talked about so far, it can take care of our physical aspects, right? Our being. And Aurobindo's philosophy also talks of that. Integral psychology talks of that. So we take care of ourselves. We do maybe journaling. We take care of our body. We take care of our mind. We feel emotionally at peace, or we feel harmonized. Let's assume we do this over and over again. There may be that time in life wherein we say, okay, what next? And I get this from clients. Like a father, he called me and he was actually trying to get help for his son. And he said, okay, but I think I'm going to come for myself. And I was like, okay, so what is it? He says, see, I come from a family which is very deprived. My father died very early. And I was wondering how to manage life, but I've managed, I'm doing very well, financially well off, created all this wealth and so on and so forth. But I'm feeling empty now. What next? I want to discuss that. Physically well, mentally well, emotionally doing well. And that's that voice of purpose, that search of meaning. And at a deeper level, once we have all of our surface needs, many of our emotional needs taken care of, some of us start moving on this track. And sometimes it comes as a very rude shock. For instance, if I were to go back about 15, 20 years back, in my, more than that actually, 20 years back, yeah, in my late 20s, I was in this management consulting role and I was doing reasonably well. And as a part of my job, I had to interview a lot of senior professionals. I was there as the psychologist, change management consultant. And there was a lot of data that I got about each one of them. And our whole challenge was, how do we make the change easy on the employees? How do we make sure that it's not difficult, reduce the resistance levels? And I had come up with this beautiful presentation and all of that, wherein I had shared the data without exposing any of the individuals in a completely confidential manner. And, we are trained to put the data all away, and I didn't have any of those biases. And I remember my partner, or my boss, he saw the integrated PPT presentation, and he said, let's share the verbatim data and the people who spoke. And I said, what? I said, that's a breach of confidentiality. And it's hard for me to even today share what he said, but these are the shocks that you get in your real life when everything is seemingly going well, which tells you maybe you need to repivot. And he told me, no, just put the presentation as it is, put the name of the person and make it in white font so nobody can read it. I will tell that person to go and read it later. And that's where you get this nagging feeling of, this is crap. I'm sorry to use this word. I don't want to do this. And I said, I'm not doing this. And it's a soft inner voice. So I spoke to one or two more colleagues who are senior, and they said, yeah, we agree with you that you can't do it. You shouldn't do it. But he's the boss. How are you going to say no? Well, as the story unfolded, I said no. We didn't share that data. That data was hidden away quietly. And within a month, I was out of the organization. No surprises there. That, I realized, was probably an inner voice speaking. And if I hadn't made that decision to listen to that inner voice, I wouldn't have listened to something which tells me this is not right. It's not going to make you feel peaceful or happy. And hence, apart from the physical, mental, and vital, happiness is being in tune or aware of your inner voice and having the courage to listen and to stand for it. And it's not just me. I hear enough narrations from enough people in enough industries wherein they share the conflicts that they face between their inner and their outer world, if they are conscious of it. And sometimes they don't listen also. There are these graphics that go around with saying, it's not like work makes you unhappy. Selling your soul makes you unhappy. And if you're spending 8 to 10 hours in a day, 5 to 6 days in a week, selling your soul for physical needs, rationalized by mental rationalizations, and you don't know where you are, honestly, at the vital or the emotional level, a lot of mental health issues actually come from there. And it's so beautifully put here. I wish I knew this earlier on, but I think we all have an inner voice, and that's what makes us human. So happiness is being human and being humane, being generous, and staying in tune with yourself. And as I attended a few sessions in the last few years, some questions stuck with me. And these are the questions that I still, go through when I keep going through these, because work and life always puts you this. So questions that help me figure out, okay, will this give me happiness? So if there's a voice which is telling you, okay, don't do this way, the question is, will this choice leave me in lasting mental peace? This question has come to me through one of the spiritual classes that I attended through the Aurobindo Ashram. Go back to the burger model with time and benefit. It's the same question. Current benefit versus future benefit. Most of us, for the sake of current benefit, we sacrifice future peace. And that's what causes a lot of trouble. So if you can ask yourself this question and ask yourself often enough, especially in situations wherein you feel a little bit of turmoil, you will get the answer. But for that, we have to be really quiet to be able to get the answer. And simple questions like, okay, if I'm going to act in this, maybe I'm going to go for a party, or I'm going to go for a get together, or maybe eat a meal, or doesn't matter, choose a certain vocation, switch a job. What happens to my progress as a person? And when I say spiritual, I just mean inner voice. It could mean anything. And you will know if you look within and if you spend enough time, is this going to lower me in the long run? And can I rationalize it? Am I going to rationalize it by saying, no, everybody does it, how else? Or is it going to raise my consciousness or raise my level of understanding of who I am? And what is the purpose? And, to be very vigilant of forces, to use any other word, and they come in all forms. People, news clippings, food can be a force too. I remember a couple of weeks back, Arunima had written to me saying, can you do a session on 9 September? And I was like, oh, 9 September, there is something. And I said, okay, I'll do it in October. And I was like, no, it just so happened that the 9 September session got pushed thanks to G20. So I'm here now but there was a vigilance of how can I do this? Because I want to do this. This gives me more lasting peace. This I didn't have earlier. And also vigilance of what is it that takes away. And it will be different for each one of us. And that's the beauty of it. So just customize, think through. And, in my job, it's easy to do this in personal work every day. If in every call I can give 10, 15 minutes or half an hour extra, it's become impersonal. But it's true for everybody. Pick up something and do it for the joy of it. Do it because it's helping someone else. Generosity of your heart touches the other's soul. And that energy circle is beautiful. And the truth is, when you do that, you've created a chain of generosity, because that person is also going to go forward with it. So just to have that reminder of, am I doing something that is not purely out of my own individual interest, money, fame, name, I have to do this. All of this we have to do. We're living in this world. Without that, we can't survive. But can we add this dimension to our life? And yeah, this I find very easy, and now a part of my routine. If I don't have it, I miss it. So if you can get up in the morning, just observe yourself. If you are at a place where you can see the sun rising, how beautiful, spend a few minutes, write gratitude, understand that your body is a manifestation. So if there's any disease, then it's a manifestation of something that's within. And the more you can recharge and align and find what is your recipe for joy, what is your recipe for happiness, and integrate your living. I think that for me is happiness and well-being. And to be able to start with awareness and go into that path. So if you're in a space where you're feeling unhappy, I think that means that the soil is fertile for you to start this journey. So instead of feeling low down and whatever, this is the starting point. If you're feeling very chirpy and happy and generally life is going well, great. Just write down what's going well. So it's there in front of you as a reminder. And when things become difficult, as they do often in life, you know how to anchor your way back. That's it. I mean, I don't have too much more. It's just all of this. And yeah, so I'll pause my sharing and I'll just come back to the session and chat and hear what everybody's journey is, because each of you have nuggets of wisdom on happiness and well-being, and I'd love to learn from all of you. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Vidya ma'am. It was really beautiful, and the topic was such that each one of us can relate to it, of course, and this would be helpful to everyone, I'm sure. As you suggested, let's see if anyone from the audience has a question or anything to share. Please go ahead. You can use the chat box or you can raise the hand, unmute yourself. Yes, Mr. Harish, please go ahead.
Ma'am, we took up a job because we needed one. And I would want to be very brief and short, but my first job was in a manufacturing company making tires. And there were no dilemmas at that point of time because all that I knew is I'm making a tire and I should make a good tire. What was happening in the organization didn't seem to concern me, and I didn't know enough about it. It was a large multinational company. My subsequent jobs, I did go through the dilemmas that you were talking about, you did mention. It is sometimes difficult to, I mean, one can control one's own actions. So some organizations do permit it. That I would not be unethical, I would not do things which make me really unhappy. But then there are things which are happening in the organization, the way it's functioning, which do sometimes trouble, or rather very often they trouble. Fortunately, unfortunately, it happens in most organizations. To what extent can we make ourselves immune to it, and should we? Or should we attempt to, if I say fight, struggle, make things better?
Does it disturb you?
Sorry, I didn't get that.
Do the dilemmas in your organization disturb you?
Yes, they do. They may not be very unethical or absurd, but some of them are very wasteful, a whole lot of wasteful exercises.
Yeah. So, I don't know exactly what's happening in your organization. It wouldn't be wise to ask too much either. But if something violates very basic values to the point that it hurts your well-being and peace of mind, then those are places where you definitely may want to either change something or take action or raise a voice. Eventually, what you do is your choice, sir. But your inner voice is telling you something is wrong. And that voice is your voice of truth.
Let me take a very specific example. I'm sorry. I work at IIT Delhi. I'm a professor here.
Wow.
And I believe that we are paid, we are employed to do the best that we can for our students. So some of us do it. Now, should I limit myself to saying, well, This is my subject, my students, my cohort, and I do my best. But sometimes it does hurt when you see my colleagues, some of them not doing what they can do for the student. Now, I do take refuge in the serenity prayer. May God give me the courage to change what I can and the patience to accept what I can't. Is that okay?
Yes. The serenity prayer is beautiful. And from a management consultant perspective, your circle of control and your circle of concern, what you do with your students, how you teach them, how you help them is within your control. So the more you do it, the better you do it, the more aligned and more joyful you will be. You're concerned about your colleagues' lack of interest in teaching their students. So there's there. So if you can, through your own dedication as a professor, through the conversations you have, and through showing joy, because joy is contagious. When they see that you're happy and you're happy teaching, sometimes it has a ripple effect. It sounds idealistic, but it happens. So if there is an opportunity in which you can inspire, maybe not the ones who are very conditioned because it's tiring, but at least the next generation of students to become better teachers, to become teachers who have their students' interests at heart, then you've gone beyond what is specifically there. What's heartening to me is to see a professor who feels the pain that I've also faced teaching students, because I've gone through this a lot too. And my individual journey was to always do what I can to find refuge, because sometimes it's very, very disconcerting. And, it's disheartening when you see the noise around and the kind of sometimes, taunts that you get when you're actually trying to do your job well. And being popular with your students actually makes you a huge threat for other professors. So these are the dynamics that get played out a lot. But to just keep focusing on what you can do to lower the volume of the noise, because the noise is eating into you. So if you can kind of physically just lower the volume of that noise in your head, and every day set the intention of what is it that you're going to do. That everyday intention setting, writing gratitude of what you've been able to achieve may help you, sir, because that's what helped me.
Sure.
Thank you for sharing your question. And I really appreciate what you're going through. Any others? Thank you, Anurag. Thank you for joining. Thank you, Anaya, Alia, Arpita. Nice to see you all here. Yeah.
Dr. Bijlani, I request you to share your thoughts, please.
Thank you, Arunima. Let me start with Professor Harish Chaudhary's question, whom I have the privilege of knowing personally. The Serenity Prayer certainly has a lot that we can learn from in those situations. When there are serious dilemmas, when some basic values are involved, as Vidya said, then yes, maybe you feel compelled to either try and change things, even if you feel that it will be difficult, or quit the system instead of getting swallowed up by the system, as happens quite often. But then the other question that you raised about the colleagues paying perhaps more attention to something else other than teaching, because teaching everywhere is one of the least rewarding ones. That in any case one feels that one can manage, but there may be other assignments, maybe with the industry, etc., which might be more lucrative, more attractive. And that happens also in medical schools, where basically the teacher is involved in three things: teaching, research, and patient care. And the priority that each faculty member gives to one thing or the other differs, the most rewarding in terms of promotions, etc., is research, not teaching and patient care, which actually is what we feel is the primary duty of the teacher in a medical school. But then some people are more concerned with what will bring faster promotions, and that unfortunately happens more with research than with good teaching or good patient care. So those dilemmas, they are there everywhere, and each person, to each his own, because it is the other person's sort of psychic being which should hurt if the person is giving priority to something which is visible, concrete, palpable, measurable, like say promotions, and neglects the joy, the lasting mental peace, the spiritual progress which Vidya was talking about, which can come from good teaching and good patient care. So in that, to each his own. But then you may get taunts, etc., if you are more concerned with teaching and patient care. But then uh, it can also be a positive influence if the others can see the joy that you are experiencing. To some extent, you would radiate it. Also, it's something which is going on within you. But basically, we have to be concerned with ourselves rather than with others. That remains one basic fact. And on that, the mother has said something beautiful. What she has said is, do not criticize others unless it is within your power to change in their nature what makes them behave so. Now, this is something very carefully she has said. Not only that, if you can't change the other person, don't criticize. Don't criticize even if you can't change the what makes the other person behave that way. Which means unless you can change the very nature of the person, uh, you don't have to criticize. Your success lies not in making the person do what you want him to do, but your success or your sort of uh, legitimate reason for criticism should be that you can change the very nature of the person so that he can see why you want him to behave differently. And this sometimes may be possible with younger colleagues. Say you are a professor, you may have younger colleagues. Instead of just using your authority of your position to tell them that this is how I want you to do, if you can make them see why you want them to do that, so that their very basic nature undergoes a change, then it will be justified. So that is something which is a very sort of subtle difference, because the junior person might do it just because of your authority and position, but that is not enough. So to take a very simple and crude thing, the person comes late for work. If you tell that person to come on time, just using your authority, the person may start coming on time. But on the other hand, if you can make the person see why it is important to come on time, so that the person undergoes a basic change and becomes more punctual as a matter of habit, then you have achieved something. Uh, uh, Coming to a few other things that occurred to me, uh, happiness is something which many people have talked about, including uh, philosophers like Bertrand Russell, who basically did not believe in God. And he has also a book called The Secret of Happiness. I think that's somewhat probably the title of the book which he has written on happiness. And it's interesting that after going through a lot of laborious analysis based on rationality and ignoring God, the conclusion that he has come to is that the recipe for happiness is overcoming chronic self-absorption. So it's interesting how, after going through all that laborious analysis, finally you reach the same conclusion, which you can reach much faster through the spiritual route. After what is overcoming chronic self absorption? That is going beyond yourself, beyond your little self, extending your vision to a wider field, looking higher and deeper and within, rather than just concerned with your little self, and that to your surface self. So that is the conclusion that he has reached. Then another thing which with Srividya I didn't share today, because that was not strictly within the scope of the topic, but she has been talking about lately, is that uh, she is a career counselor, and she can help young people uh, choose their career depending upon their basic inclinations and temperaments. But one basic difficulty she has is with the parents rather than the children, because the parents are still conditioned to, of course, the parents want their children's happiness. That is something which is beyond question. But they have a certain type of conditioning that happiness of the child depends upon being rich, having a certain status in society, and enjoying a certain degree of security. The type of security which once upon a time people had in government jobs, that once you have the job, whether you work or not, you will be uh, there for 30 years, and then after that you can retire on a pension. So that sort of a security. So they want all the three things for their children: wealth, status, and security. Now, firstly, times have changed. That sort of security doesn't exist anywhere anymore. That they don't realize. How about the other two? Yes, other two do matter. It's not that they don't matter, but then they feel that that can come through a very few restricted career avenues. And one of the parents told her that rakha kya hai? Either it's medicine or engineering. Agar wo dono nahi hai, to the third thing left is law. Or to kuch hai hi nahi, as if nothing else exists, which can bring you those two things at least, the wealth and security. They don't realize that times have changed and the number of career avenues have multiplied enormously. And therefore, it's relatively easy to find out what the child is really made for, what makes the child happy, what the child is really passionate about, what is it that will help the child merge what the child does for a living with the meaning in life. All that is possible because the career options are multiplied. So first find out, start with the child, the person who actually has to work, rather than expect the child to conform to a certain expectation. So start with the child, study the child, and then try to help the child carve a career around that the profile of the child. So instead, uh, parents misinterpret what she will do, and some of them come to her telling her that I'm trying so hard to tell my child this is what the child should do because that is where the child's happiness lies, but the child is not listening. So please drill some sense into the child. Now, she feels that uh, what actually the person who needs counseling, the person into whom some sense has to be drilled is not the child, but the parent. But then it is the parent who is going to pay, not the child. And will the parent pay for being told that it is you in whom I have to drill some sense and not into the child? Will the parent pay for it? So these are her dilemmas. And that's why she is actually finding it difficult to function with all the conscientious sort of person she is. So that's how she is finding it difficult to sort of function in this profession. So these dilemmas are something which we all face. And I can see that she has been a very quick learner. Uh, I didn't remember when she started coming to Sri Aurobindo Ashram in Delhi, but she said that she started coming only in April last year. So within just about a year, she has picked up so much. And this can't happen just because she started coming here and started reading Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. It's because all the preparation that she had earlier through the experiences that she had, this was knowledge that was just sort of waiting to burst out. And she needed a little trigger. And since the preparation was all there, with that little trigger, all this knowledge came out. That's what Sri Aurobindo said, really nothing can be taught. It's all innate. Knowledge is within us. Education just has to bring it out. And probably that is what happened when she started coming here and started reading Sri Aurobindo and the Mother, that knowledge was brought out. So it resonated so well with her because that is what she had been experiencing all along. And we saw that how well she has been able to put the integral perspective and show us that the true happiness lies in doing what our inner voice is telling us rather than taking care of the satisfaction of the body and the mind and the intellect, or the uh, satisfaction of the body, the emotional part of the being, and the mental or the intellect. So that is where uh, true happiness lies. So she really has sort of uh, been an asset. She has already started speaking in the Sunday satsangs. I thought I'll comment on one more thing, and that is at some point she said that, well, what we are talking about is something which is practical with all our human feelings and weaknesses. It's not that you should not enjoy something which tastes good. So hedonism is not a sin. And after a few days of hard work, if you enjoy partying, even that is okay. So in moderation, all these things are okay. Now, these two words, that in moderation everything is okay, and once in a while everything is okay. These are two expressions which are used so often, and they are meant to be sort of look like, minor concession I'm making to my weaknesses, and that really should not matter. I shouldn't be so harsh with myself. In moderation, everything is okay. And sometimes to a near and dear one, we say the same thing. Don't be so harsh with yourself. In moderation, everything is okay. Once in a while, everything is okay. So I thought I'll expand a little on what these two really mean, uh, because it's not just an excuse. There is a grain of truth behind it, but whether these things can be overused or abused is something which we have to be cautious about. When we say that in moderation everything is okay, what it means is that we should be able to distinguish between two things which Sri Aurobindo has talked about in the Life Divine: being satiated and being satisfied. When you eat, for example, when the tummy is full, the person is satiated. But if the food tastes good, or if there's something else like ice cream or some dessert coming, then the person feels tempted to have it. So the person is satiated, but not yet satisfied. So the difference between the two. So firstly, we have to close this gap. And secondly, how can one make satiation more or less merge with satisfaction? And even if we are taking something which has a certain hedonistic appeal, how we can stop with moderation? I think the key to making the two merge is mindfulness, which means that if one eats mindfully, then you don't have to eat too much. It's because, we are, because just a few bites can give that pleasure if one is eating mindfully. And one can get not only satiated, but also satisfied. It's because when the person is eating out of greed, the person is just gulping it down and not eating it mindfully, that the person feels like having more and more, but actually still does not get the true satisfaction. So eating mindfully is the key to it, making the two more or less merge, the satiation and the satisfaction. How about that other expression, once in a while? Once in a while, everything is okay. Uh, on that, my sort of reflection has given me in this sort of way of describing it, that once in a while means that you can't easily remember when you did that thing the last, or when you had that thing to eat the last. So this has two connotations. One is that one is not doing it too often, because if one were doing it too often, you would remember that I did it yesterday also, or I did it just a week ago also. So it should be at a time when you can't remember, which means that the interval is pretty long, and then it becomes once in a while. But it has one more connotation, and that is that the person is not attached to that pleasure. Because if one is attached to it, then even if it was a year ago, the person would be thinking about it throughout the year. Oh, now 1 month has passed, I have not had it. Now 2 months have passed, still I haven't had it. 3 months have passed, still I haven't had it. So even after a year, the person will remember, I haven't had this thing to eat for the last 1 year, which means that the person is not having it, but is actually still attached to it. So if the person can't remember when I had it last, then he has overcome the attachment. So then it truly becomes once in a while, both in terms of duration and the attachment. So it's once in a while if one can't remember when one had it the last. So with that, I'll again thank Srividya for, as usual, a very meaningful talk uh, based on personal experience, and put in very simple, effective language without sort of flamboyance, because that was not necessary. Uh, and with beautiful slides, which had all the appropriate pictures. So we hope to have you again and again,
So much, Uncle.
and hopefully soon
Gratitude
again.
to everyone.
Thank you, Srividya.
Thank you so much, Uncle. Thank you, Arunima. Thank you to all the listeners here. Thank you so much in gratitude.
Thank you, sir. Thanks again, Vidya ma'am, for the lovely session. I thank the participants as well for being with us today. We can close today's session with a moment of peaceful silence. Namaste.